All right, I want to show you now how to get in some rock solid cash gain options here, using a couple sites so that you can get yourselves in this, just about doubling your cash as you'll win most of them because these methods are pretty proven and effective now. Have I tweaked and modified throughout the weeks of this 2018 season. And if you looked at, there's an amount of watch players as my cash pools right now, about 28 players as I've narrowed down. You can look at some here, some other player pools as recently now added to the draft dashboard list. Some other professionals here as players in the pool. 28 just happens to be the same amount there. Funny enough, in this guy here, 18 players in this pool. This guy 13, 11. That's pretty narrow. And in this guy here, 36, a more diverse cash player pool. Well, they could be including tournament players as well. So that may be, of course, updating out throughout the week. You can check back and look and see the top players' picks. And then we also want to do here is, so I'll just go ahead also and go to my watch players. Use your, if you have, go to my site, wealthyfantasyfootball.com. Look at the consistency ratings, especially modified in such a way where, just a quick brief explanation, for example, Saquon Barkley is so highly ranked. This is standard deviation is just fine here. That's the 11.5. The 26.2, that's his on Draftkings in particular. That site, season average 26 points. And in the past 5 games, I was able to calculate this pretty easy as well. 27.5. It's a little bit up from his normal, but the standard deviation. And then his coefficient variation is 0.425, which is right up there, almost up there with some of the best running backs in the league. That just gives a consistency rating. This is the key thing right here, the CV, coefficient variation. The most consistent running back out of this bunch on the main slate on DraftKings, probably FanDuel as well, is Melvin Gordon. When you look at Barkley and then McCaffrey, they are followed right behind closely. Connor, because he had a down game last week, so he should bounce right back up. As last week, he was also in this consistent 0.4 range, so a very consistent running back. Lindsey is actually, this number may be wrong. I'm sorry about that. This, from what I recall, was about 0.5 or so, somewhere in that range. So Lindsey is a good play as well. Johnson, not as consistent of a play. Let's see. Glad I can work off memory with some of these things. So also, Mac, high risk, but high value. Looking at more for tournament play. Breida, is not playing a bad defense this week, but high variation, high, more of a tournament play. Take a risk on one of those guys in the tournament. As far as any other cash options, that's about it at the running back position. This is just how, you look to get your player pool started, and then you want to go over to another site like here. Start looking at your research station, see what you can find out info, get the more data you have and receive, the better that you can work with. So what I like to do here, particularly, is go to the DraftKings research station. They'll provide a link to both of these sites as you need them to go about making and determining other things like that are not included in the draft dashboard, such as matchups, correlation, which which quarterbacks go along well with certain wide receivers, tight ends, and even running backs. What matchup are they likely to have? This is something that you don't know. You can find maybe by watching the film, taking hours on, but just cuts out a lot of your time when you're looking at if they have that data, which they do under the correlation matrix, or no, wide receivers cornerback breakdown, that is, to find out which guy is likely to be matched up against which guy. If there's a height advantage, 6'2" guy versus a 5'9" guy, obviously that's an advantage. So look at that information. And then also looking over here, say we're on the running backs, look and see which guys are getting the high most value in the red zone. Look, you have to scroll all the way to the right when this sheet comes up. You got a lot of data such as projections, stats, versus opponents, let up, stats versus the team. Offensive plus defensive average. This is important too because it factors in, how highly ranking is the rushing offense versus that rushing defense. So you can sort descending, for example, and find out. So the best matchup, perhaps, of the week is James Conner. So again, an excellent play. Even Joe Mixon versus the Browns, a weak rushing defense, as well as Chubb in the same game. So you look at those guys there, and in the red zone, which guys, once they get inside the 20, let's see who gets the most attempts inside the 20. We get we're coming up with Barkley, Sony Michel when he's playing, as he hopefully will come back okay. So it's a high-risk play tournament as far as Sony Michel is concerned. Lamar Miller and McCaffrey getting a decent amount of carries inside the 20. Now, if you want to look at see which guys inside the 20 rushing inside the 10 rushing percentage, for example, it's a little bit different stat, but similar in the red zone. So you look at here, Barkley topping out 83%, way ahead, as well as Joe Mixon. Once again, McCaffrey and Chris Carson looking very good there. Now, let's say who gets the easiest carries or amount, volume-wise. Now, looking at Hyde taking out the pictures, the second string running back behind him before net. And we got Barkley, Ingram, Sony Michel showing up once again, David Johnson, Mixon. But what about percentage? We got percentage as well. Percentage for the team, of course. So we got the highest here, looking as at James Conner, Barkley. So Barkley, I don't know, evidently what happened to him here. Evidently could get some carries taken away for whatever reason. As I'm not understanding, let's try to find what happened to Barkley. Is his inside the 5 rushing percentage? Here he is. He's second. I'm sorry, behind David Johnson. Percentage inside the 5. So the easiest carries go to David Johnson, 100%. Interesting for the Cardinals. So it makes him more of a value, even though he's maybe not as consistent, but he's getting more consistent with a new offensive coordinator there. Followed by Barkley, once again Conner and Mixon. So once again, we're seeing the same backs showing up, and hopefully in our cash games as well. And then, of course, you have to take the cheaper wide receivers to look to evaluate. With the wide receivers, of course, is different. You can look to evaluate things. You can look at red zone percentage, of course, as well, but you can also do things such as targets, catch percentage here. All interesting information, great to look at. All that you really want to take into consideration, receptions per game, receiving yards per game, the air yards, all that stuff. That you just pretty much have on one screen and sort out whatever you want to. If a minimum amount you want, for example, of air yards, depending on the offense, if that's the type of offense they run, that passes the ball down the field, great. Then just sort of clear it on number of filters equals, greater than 50 air yards or 60 air yards per game, let's say. Go ahead and sort it. It's going to sort it for you. You're going to come up with the numbers to see this more clearly here, which guys come up within that range in particular. So getting still a big list of guys, and guys that are looking good. At the bottom of that list there, we can arrange it. Air yards a game. It's only showing, like I said, to 60. Pretty interesting to get into real quick here. Let's see, sort descending. So the top guy, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, great for tournament play with Winston, Antonio Brown, Hopkins, OBJ, great matchup this week versus Philadelphia secondary. A lot of guys hurt there. Devontae Adams. And if you look at the bottom of the list there for consideration, maybe for cash games, Tyrell Williams, Willie Snead, getting the majority of perhaps, percentage-wise targets in Baltimore. John Ross, of course, always more for the tournament, especially with A.J. Green coming back. He's a deep threat, but he can maybe give you some depth in the tournaments, like I said. And then Godwin, Kenny Stills, Cortland Sutton, I noticed, is getting about 60 yards at least per game. So he's a consideration, as well as Manny Sanders. So these you just got to factor in a lot of different things when it comes to this. You got to look through the sheet, make sure you get the best. It's like I said, also the matchups and the correlation matrix. Check that out. Watch the tutorial, get in there, and you can also look at some of their pools of players as well inside the site. But they do give a limited amount of players, not enough to really fill out the whole roster. So you got to get on your own and look at some of this data on your own by yourself. Starting out with getting your running backs right, so I'm talking about right here, and then getting some of the other positions as well, and the value defense, very important as well. Try to get that bounced out, as will hopefully help you find a good defense that's not on here on this site. The best way to really find a defense, look at that. Those options here is to go to the defensive matchups. So you can gather all the information, bring it in, have yourself successful week 12, and talk to you later there. Next video will be of the tournament for Draftkings. Well, I finished out Draftkings video for the week since I made this one a little bit longer, and we'll finish it up soon.